Hi, everyone. This is Tim from DigitalOcean. We're super excited to have you today for our presentation on running an e-commerce site. We're really excited to have a guest with us today. That's Robert Rand, who is Director of Partnerships and Alliances at JetRails. And we're going to introduce Robert and JetRails a little bit more. But to set the stage on why we decided to do this presentation, I just wanted to show a quick tweet. This is from the CTO of Shopify, and what he's demonstrating here is the increase in traffic to Shopify and Shopify sites over the course of the year, and it's good, maybe a little bit small on your side, but what he's demonstrating here is their traffic, sort of over the last month or so, is approaching or getting near what it usually peaks on Black Friday. So it's a very interesting time for e-commerce sites, both on the technical side and the strategy side. And certainly, while some industries might be growing right now, other industries might be shrinking right now, which is why we wanted to bring Robert on, who JetRails is a fully managed hosting provider. They work with DigitalOcean sites. They sort of work if you're in any sort of e-commerce, or if you're using WordPress, or if you're using Drupal or any of the other popular content management systems. They will host that for you and also provide an extra layer of support and maintenance. And by providing that support and maintenance, they are and have become experts at managing things like traffic spikes or the general strategy around making sure your website's fully functioning during times like right now. So with that, I'm going to remove this tweet and I'm going to let Robert take it over. So Robert, welcome. We're really excited to have you. If you don't mind just introducing yourself in a little bit more detail and just kind of walking through a little bit about what you're going to talk about, that would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. Tim, thank you so much for that warm introduction. Always great to work with partners like DigitalOcean. And thank you for inviting us on here today to share knowledge. I'm glad to be representing the JetRails team. So originally, we looked at really exclusively talking about site speed today, but as Tim suggested, given the state of the world, we decided to evolve the topic to look more deeply at how to successfully operate and optimize an e-commerce site in the current market. Speed we'll absolutely be talking about in just a moment, but many existing e-commerce sites are seeing major growth right now. They've become the primary sales channels for organizations that are omni-channel or unified across different commerce, including brick and mortar, whether retail or wholesale, manufacturing, distribution. So we're seeing a lot of movement, and just like we were seeing from that tweet up on the screen a moment ago, there's also a lot of businesses that are just getting into e-commerce for the first time. So my goal for today is to provide a little bit of a playbook while looking at both the infrastructure and some overall tips and best practices. Here at JetRails, I oversee partnerships and alliances, but I've been in the e-commerce industry for well over a decade. I've helped to lead a digital agency that brought brands like Swiss Gear and Invicta watches into e-commerce, working both on the strategy side to help to build and enhance sites, also looking at digital marketing and just general conversion rate optimization strategy. So whether it's been with startups or multi-billion-dollar organizations, hopefully some of that experience that I've had, whether with B2B or B2C, private companies, government agencies, nonprofits, hopefully some of that proves valuable today. And I'll add that in my current role, I have manage a lot of relationships with a lot of great technology companies and great agencies and development teams. So I'm looking forward to some great questions today. And I'll preface by saying that, I keep a really good Rolodex. So if there is something that goes a little bit outside of my area of expertise, we will do everything that we can to try to get some really meaningful answers, whether from the JetRails team or from various partnerships and relationships within the e-commerce ecosystem. We'll even try to perhaps tackle some of the topics on the JetRails podcast or through some enhanced opportunities that we'll have to get more information out there. So diving right in, to start off, I would say that I think we all understand intrinsically that you have spots like Amazon that you can go to place an order when you're shopping for a commodity. When you're looking for a particular item, you know what you're looking for. You're basically shopping for something quick and easy. You're going to look at the price, and you're going to look at when you're going to get that item. And beyond that, it's not really a place of relationship. It is truthfully, a simplified marketplace in terms of relationship. E-commerce stores have to go above and beyond. It's pretty much the polar opposite. So it's all about providing a phenomenal and a consistent experience. Platforms like Magento 2 that we work with a lot of JetRails, they provide a robust native feature set for that, tons of extensions and integrations, almost limitless flexibility. It also gives you, when you're working with a platform like Magento, the ability to own your data. So we were hearing a quote earlier from Shopify, which is a bit different. With these open source platforms, you have total control over which vendors you choose to integrate with, and your site itself. And that's something that we've continued to see in high demand, including, as we look at data privacy and just general competition in the market. So whether you're spinning up a copy of Magento 2 or WooCommerce, Xcart, PrestaShop, Work Area, Drupal Commerce, Oro Commerce, Apache OFBiz, Cilius, Shopware, headless BigCommerce using something like WordPress or Drupal for the front end, Shopware, all sorts of platforms that you get to choose from. Just launching the site isn't enough to be successful. And much like brick and mortar stores, there's going to be challenges that online sellers are facing. That, if you were to think about it in brick and mortar, supermarkets have figured out to put the milk in the back of the store. Stores like Costco put those rotisserie chickens that they sell pretty much at a loss in the back of the store, because they figured out how to get shoppers through the store, buying as much as possible. What's going to be an impulse buy at the checkout counter, et cetera. So with e-commerce, we've got a lot of opportunity to enhance the experience, get people through their shopping both quickly and effectively for everyone. And while each store is different, I don't want to make it sound like there's a perfect playbook that fits for every single business. There are going to be a lot of things that you or your clients are going to care about on day 2 after the site's launched. In e-commerce, I like to talk about it as taking a village, and that's going to include technology vendors. It's going to include systems that relate to payments and shipping and sales taxes and so much more. I would start off by just talking a little bit about the backbone and the infrastructure. Obviously, when we're talking e-commerce, it's different than certain types of websites in terms of user expectations, in terms of getting that user to convert into a shopper to make a purchase. So speed for us is a constant conversation that we have. Speed is going to impact conversion rates of traffic into sales. It's also going to impact your marketing. It'll impact search engine rankings. It will impact Google Ads page scores. So it will actually have, aside from folks that already get to your site, and helping to make sure that they successfully navigate the site and make a purchase, it's actually going to determine in some cases how many people you're getting to your site or at what cost. So we start off by looking at a properly sized and configured hosting environment. That's going to be determined based upon traffic expectations like peak traffic, how many concurrent users the site might get at any given time. It's going to look at things like what integrations you have, what's going to hit the API of your website. So getting that right from the get-go is obviously crucial. Having the right resources, that's also going to affect uptime, of course, and the overall reliability of the site. Then we usually, we're going to talk about caching. So with a platform like Magento, too, we'll usually recommend Varnish. You definitely need some sort of a full page caching. With most of these e-commerce platforms, that there's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot that has to come together. And without those caching layers, typically you're not going to have a very performant site. It's extremely difficult to both get all of the features and functionalities that you want and the speed without those sorts of layers. So at JetRails, we provide an extension for Varnish to allow you to handle certain configuration right from your Magento admin, for instance. Being that it's so highly recommended by our team, but you might wind up with different caching systems like Redis involved. And even then, you're going to want to make sure that these are sized out and configured well. If, for instance, you don't have enough RAM for Redis, it's not going to work the way that you're hoping. So a lot of this is just going to come down to proper architecture, in essence, for your environment. From there, there are things that we typically like to see deployed, like a cache warmer. Cache gets built, and so if you flush cache and you don't warm things back up, rebuild the cache, you're going to see slowness until people visit various pages in the site and the cache is rebuilt. We talk a lot about content delivery networks, CDNs like Cloudflare and solutions provided by Section.io. So in essence, utilizing an edge network around the globe in most cases, with different technology built in to speed things up. It can actually include things like image optimization, where your image files, even if you've uploaded something that's not quite compressed as much as it could be, not quite optimized as much as it could be, it can be done on the fly, so that you're serving up something that's more, again, performant. We also recommend, we find in a lot of cases, a lot of the items that might be slowing down a site itself or particular web pages within the site, it's going to come down to the code base. There's often a lot of extensions and plugins, modules, add-ons, apps, whatever we're going to call them, depending on the platform that you're using, that are deployed. And finding what the cause of the slowdown is usually going to be made a lot easier by deploying some software like New Relic or Blackfire.io, something that's going to help find that needle in the haystack, speed up and simplify that process for you. There can be outbound calls that are slowing you down, things that you're calling up from third-party sources that aren't within your hosting account itself. So very, very important stuff. I would also say, in some cases, we run into folks that they have tasks that are running often on cron jobs. So things like indexing of the product catalog or different data, different content in a site being crunched. And if that's not scheduled well, if you're running that during your peak sales times when you don't have to be, that's going to be an unnecessary cause of slowness or of issue. So we run into a lot of things that do come down to best practice around the nature of these stores and the traffic patterns that they get. There's also options that you can use. With Magento specifically, there's a progressive web app studio that's been deployed, a builder for a PWA front end, which can be highly performant. So there's a lot that you can choose to do on an individual basis for a particular site. And so speed, definitely crucial. From there, we see security come down to too often into the conversation a little bit too late. And so we always like to recommend that security is always at the forefront, whether you're launching the site for the first time or upgrading it or just trying to keep up with it. Security doesn't stop. It is not a one-time thing. So whether you're focused on PCI compliance or whether you just want to make sure that you're not going to have a security incident that's going to do irreparable harm to your brand, there are things that we typically recommend. That's going to include proactive technology like a WAF, virtual firewalling, that can block out a lot of types of attacks again, proactively. There's reactive technology, different things for intrusion detection, to scan for malware to see if there have been file or database changes, to be able to identify if anybody's broken through your security before too much damage is done, before it's really hurt the business too significantly. We find that these things really are meant to work in tandem. You need to have good backups. You need to ideally have those off server somewhere separate on another server in another hosting instance, in order to make sure that when you need them, that they're there for you, and making sure that they're actually running properly, that they're not corrupted, that you have them going back far enough that if there is a security instance, if there is an incident, you have something that you can go back to. All very, very important. We do find additionally that there are a tremendous number of sites that don't keep up with security patching. For PCI compliance, you're supposed to keep up with patching within about 30 days. That's going to be for patches from your software providers, companies like Magento or WooCommerce. That's ideally, also going to include updating any extensions if there are, or plugins or other add-ons. If there are software updates from those companies, that you want to make sure that your software is up to date, and that you're not leaving any security holes lingering. That those vulnerabilities are often easy for hackers to scan for and find. And so the things that are known, we definitely want to be able to make sure that users are getting out in front of. There's also best practice like least privileged access. So locking down the admin to your e-commerce website so that, for instance, only users from certain whitelisted IP addresses can get access, using two-factor authentication to gain access using CAPTCHAs. There's a lot that can be done in general. That also includes just using strong passwords and usernames, using strong URLs for the admin, not having anything at like /admin, regardless of what platform you're using. Things that you can do to just make it a lot harder for someone to try to break into the site. And again, that's all about protecting the brand. It's very hard to go backwards on security. We are currently seeing about 100,000 Magento 1 stores still live, and that platform goes end of life in June. So, we're seeing a lot of folks come to us to talk about how to keep those stores secure after end of life when Magento's not putting out security patches. We also run into a lot of folks that in their hosting environment, they're running outdated versions of PHP. Sakuri had a report in 2019 that suggested something like 54%, I hope I'm getting that quite right, but of users that they had seen running popular content management systems, whether Magento or WordPress or Drupal or something else, were running outdated software on their servers. And so again, just about general best practice. At JetRails, we provide the services that deal with all that entire security layer. But regardless of whether you're going through someone like JetRails or not, you do want to make sure that you have planning. One of the differences when you go with a fully managed provider is that we operate a NOC, an operations center, where we're monitoring all these things round the clock. That's something that is often a little bit harder to replicate on an individual basis. So from there, scalability typically comes into the equation, being able to make sure that your site is going to hold up to whatever traffic comes your way. That's usually a good thing. Everyone wants days to be like Black Friday, and there are businesses where every day right now feels like Black Friday because demand is up. And there are things that you can do to be ready. In some cases, it's about auto scaling to meet whatever demand comes your way. In many cases, it's about load testing. So our team is known for going out there, and there are tools available to the public to be able to load test to see what bottlenecks exist. And that's not always about the hosting environment. Sometimes that's about your software itself. And so whether that's an extension or some other bottleneck, being able to identify if your site's really ready for the traffic that might come its way, certainly important. If your site's not performing well on its busiest shopping days, the strategies needed there That's certainly when you have when your brand is really out there the most. When it's the most important that that you're doing what you need to be doing. Overall stability comes from a lot of these things. If your site is optimized to be fast and to handle things more nimbly, if things are better compressed and optimized and loaded across content delivery networks, things go well. But there's also best practice when it comes to developing in a development environment, using a staging environment, and then pushing things up to a production environment, the live website, and going through user acceptance testing, having a deployment process that makes sense in order to protect the website itself. That once you have real shoppers on the site, the last thing that you really want to be doing is tinkering with the live site in a way that's untested. Again, very, very common to the process. And then looking at infrastructure comes down to, really support. And that's meant to be holistic. So it really takes strong development support, strong hosting support, a marriage that comes together. E-commerce is by its very nature meant to be mission critical. And so whether it's maintenance, monitoring, and management on the hosting layer, whether it's making sure that software is updated on the software layer, on the application layer, of whatever e-commerce platform, you should always know who has your back, how long it could take to identify and address an issue that comes up, regardless of what the nature of it is. We find that often users, when the chips are down, sometimes they're scrambling. And so having a really well-defined process for that, really, really good stuff to do. And then, stepping away from hosting, there's a lot that you can do to improve your conversion rates and your overall business efficiency. So that's the beauty of e-commerce, is that it's a data-driven industry that you can really, really make a difference, and you can meet user expectations. I think that's a lot of the challenge, is that there are behemoths in the industry, whether that's the Amazons of the world or the Walmarts of the world, or other large Fortune 500 or huge organizations that evolve technology. But the good news is that those things become available to everyone else, and usually faster than anyone expects. Navigation is one of my favorites, where I do like to think of it like brick and mortar. If somebody's walking in the door, how easy is it for them to find things? In e-commerce today, obviously, there's a big push around mobile first, because so many shoppers are doing their research and experiencing your site for the first time from a mobile device. There's also still, huge needs around site search. So, if you walked into a store and asked the sales clerk, if they had a certain product, and they told you no when you had it, or when they had it, or if they told you it's on aisle 7 when it's really on aisle 10, not really going to work out that well. So the same of these sites, they're really great site search improvements that you can make to optimize, depending on the platform that you're in. A lot of these things are going to be different, also depending on the size business, whether you're still in more of a startup mode or if you're a larger enterprise. Merchandising and categorization is a fun one that we do run into a lot of sites where it's not easy to find things going through the menu structure. And so putting some of that forethought in and having filters or layered navigation or faceted search, ways that people can filter down products in a category or in the search results based on an attribute like colors and sizes and all sorts of other things. And that's important, again, for differentiating somebody that goes to Amazon with unlimited products, that more or less that they can search between. Is going to usually be very different from your e-commerce site, which is going to be more curated. So having that experience is important. And I mentioned attributes in general, just having clean, consistent data, adding in rich media where you can, product videos, multiple product photos that are high quality, unique content that's going to describe the product well. So often folks just, get information from a manufacturer that doesn't really tell the story of the product. It's very bland, product XYZ at this price, and it doesn't really explain very much. So being able to be thought leaders, being able to have content that's going to differentiate, that's going to help people to choose between products or to understand how to choose the right product to meet their particular needs, all important to the e-commerce experience. The checkout process is huge, and that's one of the most optimized processes that you'll run into. There's a lot of tech out there. There's a lot of systems out there. Some that like Bolt that holistically will replace your checkout process with something more optimized. Others that are more one-off solutions. In general, cutting down on steps, autofilling as much as possible, making it easy for someone on a mobile device, like if they're going to be filling out their phone number or some other numeric field, let them use a numeric keypad on the phone. Don't make them use the regular keyboard. There's things that you can do to optimize. Shipping is huge in the checkout. So, one of the biggest reasons that somebody's going to stop somewhere in the checkout process, it's because they're not satisfied with what they see shipping wise. So these days it's becoming very common to show delivery times, let folks throughout the process know on the product page, on the cart, when that item should arrive for them, letting them understand, the overall options that they have, whether that's for some sort of expedited shipping. We find that today, with what's going on out there, there are more folks that are setting up curbside pickup and other store pickup options. There's more, freight in some cases being set up in the wholesale world, where the e-commerce site really needs to quote the freight rates, not leave that for some next step, but ideally just let the shopper know exactly what that order is going to look like, and get them through the process. Generally speaking, we talk a lot about trust. And so, obviously the entire site should have an SSL. That applies to any site today, whether it's, just a simple WordPress site. I'm a believer that everything should be running over a secure protocol. And search engines and browsers like our friends at Google create, believe the same. So, important stuff, but also product reviews and merchant reviews, being able to give shoppers a chance to weigh in and being able to showcase that is important. In some cases, some sites having shopping guarantees, especially if you're not a well-known household brand, being able to instill confidence that that order is safe, that the shopper isn't going to deal with any kind of credit card fraud or other issues in the aftermath. Some good stuff that you can do. In some cases, it's simple stuff like just having a phone number visible on the website. So, for a shopper, majority of them have no interest in calling you, but they want to know if they have an issue that they can, that they're not going to get stuck in some kind of a quagmire trying to get help or trying to deal with, something that didn't arrive in good shape. Live chat is also, something that goes hand in hand. That one of the benefits there is that with a good live chat system, you don't have to wait for someone to message you. You can message them if you see, for instance, that they've got a lot in their cart, or they're sitting on a product page for a while with one of your more expensive items, or something else that you think is going to benefit your business. That just like if it was a retail store, that you would expect if someone was standing there looking at that expensive piece of jewelry, that a sales clerk would go and give them a hand and offer them help. No different here. I would say there are things that you can also do to help convert more first-time buyers, more first-time shoppers. I should say. Maybe they're not quite buyers yet, but they're on the site. They're browsing. There is technology that you can use to send emails to folks that haven't even necessarily made a purchase that with you in that moment. Perhaps they've signed up for your email newsletter, they've done something else, and you have the data to send what we call abound and browse emails to let them know, hey, we saw you were looking at that product. They might not have even added it to their shopping cart, but there's a lot of good follow-up, just like remarketing ads, where you can have ads follow them across the internet as they read blogs, go to news sites, serve those up through platforms like Google Ads or Steelhouse or AdRoll, and be able to follow them with those. There's things that you can do that relate to multivariant testing, A/B testing, to find out what's going to get shoppers that are coming to certain pages or taking certain actions or that came through certain marketing campaigns to convert. We do see for some industries that things like buy now and pay later or financing really do help the conversions. That in some cases also on the other side, that for instance, with credit card fraud prevention, that in many cases there are users that have credit card fraud solutions that block out too many good orders. And so by getting something that's better tuned, in some cases, you can wind up seeing that a lot of orders that you weren't getting to fulfill, they were being blocked or they seemed scary. They were coming up red. They're actually safe and you can fulfill those orders. And you can, in some cases, through some fine tuning, you can actually increase the revenue of the business without necessarily getting any additional traffic or having a particularly different user interface. And then there's those solutions to keep them coming back. So loyalty and reward point programs that try to build that relationship and get people buying again from the brand, from the site, instead of going somewhere else or just shopping price, having them build up something there. There are those abandoned cart emails. So folks that added something to cart and didn't quite check out yet, reminding them to come back, sometimes offering them a discount or some kind of a benefit. There's multi-channel marketing where today you can pull in marketing systems in a unified system like eCommerce, and you can actually have different marketing messaging that will go out through social media ads, through Google ads, through email marketing, through a variety of different channels, push notifications, different kinds of browser notifications that is going to be targeted to the user, and it's going to be predictive around which mediums, which marketing platforms the users are going to be most responsive to, which offers or communications they're going to be most responsive to. So, things that traditionally speaking, take a lot of work to create, are being brought into the market and slowly but surely are making their way farther and farther down market toward SMB. And so, a lot of great stuff there. And even things like subscriptions, offering folks a chance to sign up for something that they can get that shipment, that replenishment every month, or that box of the month, or whatever it may be, that have still held pretty strong in some industries. So, to wrap with some of that thought process, I'd say that you can keep a lot of efficiency in the business. It leads to happier customers. It leads to cost savings for the e-commerce business and bigger profits. It can also free up staff, depending on what you're doing, to work on other beneficial tasks. So I would say, don't always stop with your front end experience, but also really do look at back of the house, and whether that's stuff like multi-channel integration, connecting data with software like accounting, ERP, point of sale, CRM. Cutting down on some of that manual data entry and human error, or even things like going back and negotiating shipping rates with your shipping vendors like a UPS or FedEx, or going through companies like 71 Pounds that help make sure that you're getting any refunds that you're due from those companies, that you haven't overpaid them. There's a lot that you can do to build business optimization that makes the entire operation just more successful overall. So there's always that inclination to tweak the front, but business process on the back just as important in terms of success. So that's been probably a lot of a lot of information. I'm sure that there have been questions streaming in and other things to hopefully not stump me too badly. Tim, how am I doing over here?
Great. I was just about to jump in and say that was really incredibly thorough. If you think about it, we just went through a full sort of technical playbook that you could run if you're in charge of an e-commerce store, and then went into everything from business to marketing strategy as well. So I think everyone that's been on the stream owes you a debt of gratitude there. There's certainly a lot of information. Let's start going through questions. We had a couple pop up. But first, I sort of had a question as I was listening to you. If you are in charge of an e-commerce store, maybe the business side of things, or maybe the technical side of things, and you're not getting sort of tickets or feedback that your site isn't functioning well, do you have any recommendations on how you might do an audit, or how you might go about trying to figure out if there are either technical or strategic things that are affecting how a user interacts with your site?
That's a fantastic question. So, depending on how you want to look at this, a lot of these platforms like Magento have some built-in error reporting. And so you can go to the logs and you can look to clean that up. And I always think that that's a healthy thing to do. That why would you want errors running there? There are uptime monitoring services at JetRails. It's included in our stack, but in general, there are pingdom alerts and other things that you can set up out there, so that if there are things that you might not be aware of because they're intermittent, you might be able to pick up on more of that. And so that's certainly going to be important. There's a variety of things in between. Obviously, we always recommend a variety of user acceptance testing, actually testing the site firsthand, making it easy for users to get in contact if there are issues, because you want to know those. You don't want those things festering. There are variety. And I mentioned earlier solutions like New Relic that can also help you in that kind of a debugging effort to find some of those issues and address them in advance. So it's a variety. I'll also say that keeping your software up to date, while once in a while that can push a bug out, a new bug, by and large, you're getting whatever speed enhancements have been created in those layers. You're also getting whatever bug fixes have been applied. So hopefully those that are keeping more up to date have fewer of those issues.
Gotcha. So you have a couple different options. Like, you can rely on someone like a JetRails to sort of do that work for you. If you could sort of use different technology out there to help ping you if you're issues. And then I think on the strategic side, like some of the things you mentioned regarding a frustrating checkout experience, in that regard, it seems to me like you should be using your site daily to make sure that like you can get through it fine. And if you notice anything,
for sure, anytime that you're pushing out any changes, you should be manually testing. Absolutely. Yeah. It is always going to be a marriage from my perspective between the development team and the web hosting support. So ideally, from my perspective, you've got folks on the hosting layer that are watching things from their side, and you've got your developers that are testing and thoroughly dealing with the application layer and error logs and things that relate to the application itself. And those things are going to come together from the user perspective, from the website owners, e-commerce managers, whatever titles float around. Absolutely, it's your business. You want to be testing firsthand and not just completely, relying on others when it comes to testing your actual checkout, making sure that everything's working.
Cool. All right. So we had a couple of questions, and I'll just put this comment up on the screen for us around multi-vendor platforms. So this question came in around using Magento 2, but I think there were, if you could maybe speak to this question exactly, but also speak to just in general multi-vendor platforms, your recommendations, sort of how to manage that. There are some chatter in the chat about that.
Absolutely. So multi-vendor or multi-seller platforms are generally, they are what we think of when we think of a marketplace like an Amazon or an eBay, where different sellers can sign up and they can list product. There are different variations, of course, but what you're trying to do is have the functionality for these different sellers to get paid, often for some kind of a commission to go back to the owners of the website that have to operate the site. There are different challenges that come into play, like sales tax collection. Nobody really wants to talk about sales taxes most of the time, but there are laws in a lot of states now that suggest that if you're running any sizable multi-vendor marketplace, even maybe $100,000 in revenue for a particular state, that the marketplace needs to collect those sales taxes. So without waxing too philosophical about marketplaces, there are a few ways that you can go about getting the right marketplace platform. In the Magento ecosystem, there are some extensions that have been out there, and there are extensions that add to those extensions in order to build upon that capability. There are platforms out there like Xcart that have a more native multi-vendor version. That comes with a paid version, paid license of Xcart. But nonetheless, you're getting more of that functionality natively from the team that developed the platform. So there are options out there. I'd be happy to share some insights offline about that as well. I would always keep an eye out for how are you going to split payments effectively, and how are you going to handle sales taxes. And depending on that, it may actually push you away from a certain module or solution and push you toward another. So that comes down to specifics about the individual business and how they want to operate. But you can do it with Magento 2 with extensions, unless you want to totally write those extensions yourself. Or you can go to a platform like Xcart that has a variation for that. There is also a solution that does tie into platforms like Magento called Miracle. If there's funky spelling there, I believe it's Mirakl, something similar to that, that will add some of this functionality to Magento or other systems. It's a paid solution. Tim, you're muted.
Yeah. We'll follow up with the links for these as well. Everything, we try to comment in the chat when Robert brought up something, but for these we'll include. Robert, I won't single out the specific question. There were a couple questions, but do you mind? Someone had been having speed issues while using Shopify, and they were interested in how a CDN, specifically Cloudflare, might help them with that. Do you mind just offering some recommendations on sort of how to get started with that, and then sort of how a CDN helps speed up something like a Shopify site?
That's a little bit more difficult, given that Shopify, to the best of my knowledge, is already leveraging a form of CDN. So adding another may or may not be either possible or really the bigger solution. I would say that with Shopify, it really depends on what the sources of the slowdown are. So there are, in some cases, themes or apps. Basically, in the Shopify ecosystem, everything's really relying on the API. You don't have access to the source code. It's not an open source environment. So everything's hitting the API. And depending on what third-party apps and what systems you've got, I would first look inwardly to try to find source of slowness with Shopify. Ideally, it should be fast. I have seen reports where there are issues of different cache breaking and different issues, again, that you can't really do that much about as an end user in a SaaS solution like that. But I actually don't know how successful you'd be in deploying a CDN on top of a SaaS solution like Shopify. That's a really good question.
I think that's sort of the give and take, right? With going with someone like Shopify, is you sort of give up some of the ability to customize certain things, especially on the back end. So when you're choosing whatever you're going to use, sort of the sacrifice you need to make if you're going to choose something like Shopify versus one of the alternatives out there.
Yeah, and in a lot of cases, again, there may be some large images or some particular code or something third party that's slowing you down that may not, in the case if it's an app or something like that, the CDN may not solve it anyway. So my first line of thought is always to go back and sort of turn off apps, try to pinpoint the one that's causing you grief, review the theme and look for options and opportunities. And there are some tools that you can use that will help you to find some of those sources of slowness. There are websites like GT Metrics that I like to run. They can sometimes help you to identify some of those large files or other issues. And in some cases, you might be able to even bring that up to Shopify support and get their feedback. But we do know some great Shopify developers if someone needs particular help there.
Okay, great. So ultimately, the recommendation there is, don't jump to trying to add something else to your site. Try to do an internal audit first. Make sure you leverage Shopify as well. That's sort of, one thing that you get with Shopify is maybe you lose some of the customization, but you have a built-in support team, someone that's managing
Absolutely.
that.
Whereas with a platform like Magento that doesn't natively have a CDN or WooCommerce or any of these open source systems where it absolutely add it, but with something that already has some CDN layer caked in, I would first look to some other solutions, find the problem.
Gotcha. So I think this might be similar, Robert, but I'll put it up there and just get your perspective on it. So this question just came in. I think this is another question where you're probably going to want to do an audit and look at things like third-party applications, but I'll let you speak to it.
Yeah. So, if the user's having an issue with their CDN, not really addressing their time to first byte, there may be underlying issues of the configuration of the hosting environment itself, which the CDN can't necessarily make up for. There may be other full page caching and other things that can be deployed that are going to help. So that is going to come down a little bit more to a full audit. That's one that our team would love to see if we can weigh in and make some direct suggestions on. We do that for lots of folks, whether or not they wind up working with JetRails specifically. We're happy to see if there's something obvious there that we can recommend.
Yeah, and what I'll do is I'll link to the JetRails webpage right now, and you guys have a form right on that says right on your homepage. So if you want
absolutely, and we have a speed page. JetRails.com should be /speed, where you can do a quick time to first byte test, and we can get someone in contact that should be able to provide at least some insights, whether or not you're looking for any specific service from JetRails.
So we have one more question. This one's a little bit more niche, but I'll ask it. So we had someone that wanted to know if there are any intricacies or any sort of different styles of approach for more highly regulated industries, specifically like banking sectors. So I'm not sure, Robert, if you have experience working with websites that are more highly regulated, but if you do, is there anything else that they should be paying attention to outside of everything else that you've gone through today?
Yes. in a word, yes. So there are different industries that adhere to different standards. Certainly, the bigger the business, the more that they're under the spotlight for different things. And so whether that's more stringent adherence for different sales tax collection and compliance, whether that's more expectation when it comes to ADA compliance and going above and beyond, as I hope folks do, to make sure that the people with disabilities have the best time navigating a site as possible. From our perspective, we run into it on the compliance side. So if a business is in the medical field and they have data that's going to flow through the site, like if they're allowing people to deal with some kind of a prescription or something that deals with medically relevant data, HIPAA compliance, where we help different users to achieve that from the hosting perspective, to make sure that things are properly locked down and there's that proper chain of who has access to what. For e-commerce in general, PCI compliance is the standard, but that doesn't mean that in a particular industry that there won't be unique compliance needs. And so that's typically dealt with on a case-by-case, depending on who your regulators are.
Gotcha. Okay. So that makes a lot of sense. I think that question, like, is anything different for highly regulated industries? Yes. The answer is always yes.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, I think that's all the questions so far. If there are any we missed, Robert and I will both make an effort to make sure we respond individually. We brought up Robert specifically brought up a lot of different options, whether you're trying to do an audit, email marketing. We brought up Section.io for a different kind of CDN as opposed to Cloudflare. We'll make sure we put all these links in the description of the YouTube video so that you have them and you can visit them. This video will also be up on the DigitalOcean YouTube page as well. Robert went through a ton of information, so if you got anything from it, it's probably worth it to go re-listen in case you missed anything. And once again, I'll make a plug. If you are listening in and having potential issues, whether they're speed related or anything really support or maintenance related, any of the issues that Robert went through in terms of better optimizing your site, a managed solution like JetRails can really help you make sure that you're not letting your current users down, but also potentially help you grow. So I'd give another nod to JetRails and the work they do, and they have a very large breadth of platforms they support. So another plug for them, we put their website in the comments. But if you're interested in talking to them, I happen to know for a fact they're great and they provide great service. But Robert, anything you want to leave the viewers with before we end the stream?
Well, mainly, that if there's anything that we can help, including if someone's looking for a particular technology provider, something that, that we might be able to connect them with, it doesn't need to be that they're looking for our services specifically. We're always happy to connect folks with great agencies, great tech providers. And we've covered a few of the questions that came up today, a few of the topics we've covered in the JetRails podcast. So we're also, trying to put out great content to help folks to grow and thrive out there, whether or not they're JetRails customers specifically. We do believe that, we're part of that community. And so really just, to stay healthy, keep on trucking and have happy selling out there.
Yeah, we hope everyone is staying safe and healthy, of course, during these times. So thanks everyone for attending. Robert, thank you so much. This was extremely helpful. I hope for the folks that listened in, it's helpful for them or are going to listen in the future. Again, we'll have all the links posted here, and we hope everyone has a great day. We'll be doing more of these types of videos on the DigitalOcean YouTube channel over the next couple of weeks, just all different kinds of things focused on small businesses. But certainly if you're in the e-commerce world, it can be a very hectic and strange time right now. So Robert, again, thank you so much for your information today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Bye, everyone. Thanks so much for listening in.